You're not family, you only stayed because it was convenient. My daughter said that while signing the inheritance papers. My son-in-law stayed quiet. I just signed another sheet and left in silence. 3 weeks later, she found out what I had signed. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The rain tapped against my windshield as I pulled into the law office parking lot. My arthritic hands gripped the steering wheel, tighter than necessary, partly from the pain, partly from the anxiety gnawing at my stomach. I didn't know why Indy had called me to sign these papers today, but her tone left no room for questions. Just be there at 3, Mom. Don't be late. These papers need your signature. I turned off the engine and sat there, watching raindrops race down the glass. At 65, I'd thought I was past the stage of feeling like a scolded child. Apparently, not. Inside, the receptionist barely looked up as I shook the rain from my umbrella. "They're waiting for you in conference room B," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. The hallway seemed longer than it should have been, each step forward carrying the weight of something final. I'd been feeling it for months now. The subtle shift in how Indy looked at me, the way conversations stopped when I entered rooms, the whispered discussions between her and Lance. I knocked softly before entering. They were both there, Indy in her crisp navy suit, Lance beside her, his attention fixed on a stack of papers. Neither stood when I entered. "You're 5 minutes late," Indy said, not looking up from her phone. "I'm sorry, the rain—" "It's fine. Just sit down. We have things to do after this." I settled into the hard-backed chair across from them, placing my worn purse on my lap. For a moment, the only sound was the shuffling of papers as Lance arranged them in front of me. "These are the final distribution papers for Dad's estate," Indy explained, her voice clinical. "We've already gone through everything. This is just a formality to transfer the remaining assets." I nodded, though I knew there was more to it. After losing Harold 4 years ago, I'd moved in with Indy and Lance to help with little Mason. What started as a grandmother's love, making breakfast, handling school pickups, reading bedtime stories, had slowly morphed into something else. I'd become the live-in help, convenient, but not quite family. Lance slid the papers toward me. "Sign where the tabs are," he said, his voice flat. It was the most he'd spoken to me in weeks. As I reached for the pen, my hand trembled slightly. "What exactly am I signing away?" I asked, my voice softer than intended. Indy sighed, the exasperated sound I'd grown too familiar with. "Mom, it's just formalities. Everything Dad left for both of us. The house, the accounts, his investments. We've been over this." I hadn't been over anything. Since Harold's death, financial discussions happened without me, behind closed doors. But I nodded anyway and began signing. "I'm glad this is finally getting settled," Lance said to Indy, as if I weren't there. "We can move forward with the renovations next month." Renovations? To my house? The home Harold and I had built together? I paused, pen hovering over the next tab. "What renovations?" Indy's eyes met mine, something cold and unfamiliar in them. "We're gutting the old place. It's outdated, and we need the space for entertaining." "But that's my home," I whispered. "It's just a house, Mom. And technically, it's our house now." I felt the air leave my lungs. "I don't understand." Indy leaned forward, placing her manicured hands flat on the table. "Let me make this clear. We're done playing house. You've been staying with us because it made sense when Mason was younger. He's in school full-time now. But I thought—" "You thought what? That you'd live with us forever?" "That wasn't the deal." I stared at my daughter, this stranger with familiar eyes. "What deal?" "I came to help you after your father died. And we appreciated that. But it's time for you to find your own place." My pen clattered to the table. "Where will I go?" For the first time, Lance looked uncomfortable, but Indy's expression remained unmoved. "There's a nice retirement community in Brentwood. We've already looked into it for you." The words hit like physical blows. A retirement home. They'd been planning this. All those hushed conversations, the sudden questions about what furniture I wanted to keep, the casual mention of an old friend who loved her new senior living arrangement. I reached for the pen again, a strange calm settling over me. I would sign, I would walk out, I would disappear from their perfectly curated lives. As I added my final signature, Indy gathered the papers without a word of thanks. She slid them into a folder, her wedding ring catching the fluorescent light. The ring Harold had helped Lance pick out for her. "Is that all?" I asked, rising slowly. "That's all," Lance confirmed, still not meeting my eyes. I clutched my purse, turned to leave, but Indy's voice stopped me. "Mom, don't make this harder than it needs to be. You're not family. You just stayed because it was convenient. For all of us." The words cut deeper than any knife. I didn't turn back. I didn't let her see the tears that sprang to my eyes. I simply walked out, my footsteps echoing in the hallway. 3 weeks later, she would discover what I had actually signed. 3 weeks later, everything would change. But in that moment, as I walked to my car in the rain, I was just an old woman with a broken heart and nowhere to call home. My small motel room felt simultaneously claustrophobic and too empty as I unpacked the single suitcase of belongings Indy had deemed mine. The rest of my life, 4 decades of memories, trinkets, and treasures, remained in the house that was no longer my home. I placed Harold's photograph on the nightstand, my fingers lingering on his smiling face. "You'd be so disappointed," I whispered to him. That night, sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, memories flooded in, not as gentle waves but as a crushing tsunami. I remembered Indy as a little girl, her front teeth missing, rushing to show me her spelling test with the gold star. I remembered her high school graduation, how proud Harold and I had been as she gave her valedictorian speech. I remembered her wedding day, how Harold had whispered, "We did good, Rhonda," as we watched her dance with Lance. And then came Harold's diagnosis. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months, the doctor said. He lived for 8, fighting with everything he had. "Promise me you'll take care of each other," Harold had whispered in his hospital bed, holding both my hand and Indy's. We'd both nodded, tears streaming down our faces. A promise I had kept, a promise she had discarded. When Harold died, Indy was pregnant with Mason. She and Lance had just bought their new house, their careers were taking off, and they were overwhelmed. It seemed natural when they suggested I move in to help with the baby. "Just until we get our footing, Mom," Indy had said. "It would mean everything to us." I sold my little condo without hesitation. What did I need it for? My family needed me. The first year with Mason was a blur of midnight feedings, first smiles, and the pure joy of watching a new life unfold. Indy went back to work, and I settled into a routine with my grandson. We became a team, Mason and I. But as the years passed, something shifted. Indy's requests became demands. Lance's gratitude turned to expectation. The guest room became Rhonda's room, not Mom's or Grandma's. "Could you have dinner ready by 7? The Brightons are coming over." "Mason needs to be picked up early from school today. One of us will be home by 8. "We've got that charity event tonight. You don't mind handling bedtime again, do you?" I didn't mind. Not really. I loved Mason, loved being part of his life. But slowly, invisibly, I was being erased. From mother to nanny, from family to staff. There was the Christmas party when I overheard Indy introducing me to her colleagues. "This is Rhonda, she helps us with Mason." Not my mother. That stung. Then came Mason's school events, where Indy would arrive late, take over with a bright smile, graciously thanking me for filling in as if I were hired help, not his grandmother. The morning light was creeping through, The thin motel curtains before I finally drifted off, exhaustion overcoming heartache. I woke to a pounding on my door. Disoriented, I fumbled for my glasses and checked the time. 10:37 a.m. I never slept this late. Mrs. Keller? You need to check out by 11 if you're staying another night. A gruff voice called through the door. Yes, thank you. I'll be down shortly, I called back, my voice scratchy from crying and lack of sleep. I dressed slowly, my joints protesting more than usual, age or heartbreak. It was hard to tell the difference sometimes. As I gathered my meager toiletries from the bathroom, my phone rang. Indy's name flashed on the screen. My heart leaped traitorously. Had she changed her mind? Was she calling? To apologize? I answered, trying to keep the hope from my voice. Hello? Mom, where are you? Her tone was all business. At the Gateway Motel on Lexington. A motel? Good grief. Why didn't you go to Aunt Patricia's? Patricia lived 3 hours away and hadn't spoken to me since Harold's funeral, when she accused me of monopolizing the sympathy. Indy knew this. I needed somewhere close, I said simply. Whatever. Listen, I need Mason's vaccination records for camp. Where did you put them? Not, how are you? Not, are you okay? Just another demand. In the filing cabinet in the study. 3rd drawer, blue folder. Great, thanks. She paused. So, have you thought about Brentwood Acres? They have an opening next month, the retirement home, as if I had been considering it rather than having it thrust upon me. I don't think Brentwood is for me, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Mom, don't be difficult. It's a nice place. They have activities and people your age. I said no, Indy. A sharp exhale. Fine, but you need to figure something out. Lance's mother wants to use the guest room when she visits next month. Of course, the other grandmother, the one who sent expensive gifts and took lavish vacations with Indy and Lance, but rarely spent actual time with Mason. I understand, I replied, though I didn't. I couldn't understand how my daughter had become this person. Good. I'll let you know when we're moving your things out. She hung up before I could respond. I stared at the phone, a strange sense of clarity washing over me. This call, so cold and transactional, crystallized everything I had been feeling, but couldn't articulate. For years, I had been making excuses for Indy's behavior. She was stressed. She was ambitious. She had so much on her plate. But the truth was simpler and more painful. She simply didn't value me anymore. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, Harold's photograph in my hands. I kept my promise, I told him. I took care of her, but she's not taking care of me. My eyes fell on my battered leather purse, where the copy of yesterday's paperwork sat. The documents I had signed so obediently. The papers I had subtly altered with a single checked box before signing. A small act of self-preservation that Indy and Lance, in their rush and arrogance, had missed completely. In 3 weeks, when the processing was complete, they would discover what I had done. Not out of malice, but out of necessity. The property in Cape Cod that Harold had left solely to me, our secret sanctuary, would remain mine, not part of the estate they so eagerly divided. It wasn't a fortune, but it was something. It was mine. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to think not about what Indy needed, but what I needed. I reached for my phone again, this time calling a number I hadn't used in years. Hello, Martin. It's Rhonda Keller. I need your legal advice. Martin. Goldstein's office smelled of old books and coffee. At 72, he was semi-retired, but he'd been Harold's friend for 40 years and our family lawyer for nearly as long. His eyebrows rose as he reviewed the documents I'd brought. Rhonda, you checked box 14C. He looked at me over his reading. Glasses. Did you understand what you were doing? I nodded, smoothing my skirt with trembling hands. I did. and they didn't notice? They didn't even look. Lance just told me where to sign. Martin leaned back in his chair, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Harold would have appreciated the irony. He was right. Harold had always admired quiet strength, the kind that didn't announce itself. In our 43 years of marriage, I'd seen him outmaneuver countless aggressive businessmen with nothing more than patience and attention to detail. "Tell me about the property again," I asked, though I knew the story by heart. I just wanted to hear it from someone who remembered Harold kindly. Martin's eyes softened. 4 years ago, just after his diagnosis, Harold came to see me. He wanted to protect you. Ensure you'd always have a place that was yours alone. He tapped the folder. The Cape Cod house was his gift to you. He specifically arranged for it to remain separate from the family estate. The Cape Cod house. Our little sanctuary by the sea. We'd purchased it for a song 30 years ago when the area was still undeveloped. Harold had seen the potential in the weathered little cottage with its unobstructed ocean view. Over the years, we'd renovated it bit by bit, turning it into our personal paradise. "The property has tripled in value since you bought it," Martin continued. "Conservative estimate puts it at about $2.8 million now," I gasped. "That much? That?" Area has exploded in the last decade. Plus, Harold made some smart investments with the rental income. There's a sizable account attached to the property. A strange sensation washed over me. Not quite joy, not quite vindication, but something in between. For years, Indy and Lance had treated me as financially dependent on them, conveniently forgetting that I had supported them countless times. "When will they find out?" I asked. 3 weeks, give or take. When the estate finalization goes through, they'll realize the Cape Cod property wasn't included. Martin paused. "Rhonda, they're going to be angry." I smiled sadly. "They're already angry, Martin. They just don't know it yet." The next day, I checked out of the motel. Martin had insisted I stay in his guest house until I figured out my next steps. "Marjorie would have my head if she knew I let you stay in that flea trap," he'd said, referring to his late wife. The guest house was a charming little cottage behind his main home, with a small garden and enough privacy to think clearly. For the first time in days, I spent the morning calling the few friends I'd managed to maintain despite Indy's subtle disapproval. Most were shocked to hear what had happened. "But why would they do that?" my friend Dorothy kept asking. "After everything you've done for them?" I had no answer. Or rather, I had too many. Greed. Entitlement. The slow poison of taking someone for granted until they become invisible. On the 3rd day at Martin's, I found myself sorting through the single suitcase of belongings I'd managed to take with me. At the bottom, wrapped in a scarf, was a small leather-bound book, Harold's journal. He'd given it to me on his last Christmas, his handwriting shaky but determined. "Read it when you need to remember us," he'd whispered. I'd never opened it, too afraid of the grief it might unleash. But now, sitting in the quiet of Martin's garden, I felt ready. I needed Harold's voice, his wisdom. The first entry was dated shortly after his diagnosis. September 15th, 2019. Rhonda doesn't know I've seen through Indy's plan. Our daughter has always been clever, but she thinks I don't notice how she's already rearranging our lives, making decisions about Rhonda's future. I've always been proud of Indy's ambition, but I fear it's hardened her heart. I spoke with Martin today about protecting Rhonda. The Cape Cod house will be her security, her escape, if needed. I've arranged everything to keep it separate from the main estate. Indy won't know until it's too late to contest. I hope I'm wrong about our daughter. I hope that when I'm gone, she'll show Rhonda the love and respect she deserves. But I've seen the coldness in her eyes when she thinks no one's looking. How she speaks to her mother when I'm out of the room. Rhonda believes the best in everyone, especially her children. It's her greatest strength and her greatest vulnerability. She won't see this coming until it's too late. I closed the book, tears streaming down my face. Harold had known. All along, he had seen what I couldn't bear to acknowledge. That Indy had been planning to discard me for years. The next entry confirmed my fears. December 3rd, 2019 overheard Indy and Lance talking about elder care options for Rhonda after I'm gone. Not about bringing her to live with them, but about facilities where she wouldn't be lonely. As if warehousing my wife would be doing her a favor. I confronted Indy. She claimed they were just exploring all possibilities. The look in her eyes when she thought I wasn't watching told a different story. She sees her mother as a burden, an obligation to be managed. I've added more to Rhonda's separate account. Martin has the details. The Cape House isn't just a property. It's her independence. Page after page revealed Harold's quiet battle to secure my future, his growing concern about Indy's character, his love for me shining through every word. In his final entry, written just days before he died, Harold seemed at peace. April 28, 2020, everything is in place for Rhonda. The Cape House, the accounts, all secured in her name only. Indy doesn't suspect a thing. My greatest regret is leaving Rhonda to face what's coming alone. But she is stronger than she knows. When the time comes, she'll find that strength. I've loved her since we were practically children. She deserves so much better than what Indy is planning. I hope someday our daughter realizes what she's throwing away. Not just her mother's love, but her own capacity for compassion. Rhonda, if you're reading this, remember, you were always enough. More than enough. And you deserve a life filled with the same kindness you've given others. Don't let them convince you otherwise. I closed the journal, clutching it to my chest as the sun began to set over Martin's garden. For the first time since that awful day in the lawyer's office, I felt something other than grief and betrayal. I felt ready. The ringing of my phone shattered the morning quiet of Martin's garden. I didn't need to check the caller ID. The specific tone I'd set for Indy years ago blared through the peaceful space. Exactly 3 weeks had passed since that day in the lawyer's office. I took a deep breath and answered, "Hello, Indy." "What the hell did you do?" Her voice was ice and fire simultaneously. I set down my tea, surprising myself with how steady my hand was. "I believe you'll need to be more specific." "The Cape Cod property. It's not in the estate paperwork. The lawyer said you checked some box that kept it separate." "Box 14C, I said calmly. "You knew exactly what you were doing." She was practically screaming now. "You deliberately tricked us." The accusation might have wounded me a month ago. Now, it almost made me laugh. I signed documents I was asked to sign. If you and Lance had bothered to review them properly, you might have noticed. "This is theft." "No, Indy, it's mine. The Cape House was always mine. Harold left it to me specifically, separate from the estate. He made sure of it. Dad would never—" "Your father knew exactly what he was doing," I interrupted, surprising myself with my firmness. "He saw how you were treating me, even before he died. He wanted to make sure I was protected." The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. "We're coming over," she finally said. "Where are you staying?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to refuse, to keep my sanctuary private. But another part, perhaps the stronger part, wanted to face her, to stand my ground. "I'm at Martin Goldstein's guest house." "The old lawyer? Why would you—" "Never mind. We'll be there in an hour." The call ended abruptly. I sat motionless for several minutes, processing what had just happened and what was about to happen. Then I called Martin. "They're on their way," I told him. "Just Indy and Lance, I think." "Do you want me to be there?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "No. I need to do this myself." I paused. "But maybe stay nearby." "I'll be in the main house. Just shout if you need me." I used the next hour to prepare myself, not just emotionally, but physically. I showered, styled my hair, and put on my favorite navy dress, the one Harold always said made my eyes shine. I wanted Indy to see me not as the discarded mother, but as the woman I truly was. Strong, dignified, whole. When the doorbell rang, I was ready. Indy stood on the porch, Lance slightly behind her. She wore her power suit, the one she saved for important negotiations. Her eyes widened slightly at my appearance, as if she'd expected to find me disheveled and broken. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. They entered the small guest house, Indy's gaze sweeping critically over the modest furnishings. I led them to the sitting area, where I'd prepared coffee and Indy's favorite lemon cookies, the ones I used to bake for her school lunches. "Let's get to the point," Indy said, ignoring the offered refreshments. "You deliberately withheld the Cape property from the estate division." "I didn't withhold anything," I replied evenly. "The Cape house was never part of the estate to begin with. Your father left it directly to me." "That's impossible. Everything was supposed to be divided equally." "Not everything. Harold made specific provisions for me. The Cape house was my security." Lance cleared his throat, speaking for the first time. "The property is worth almost $3 million now." "I'm aware." "Be reasonable, Rhonda," he said, dropping the mom he'd used for 15 years. "That's a significant asset. It should be shared." I looked at him steadily. "Like your home was shared with me, before you decided I was inconvenient?" He had the grace to look away. Indy paced the small room, her heels clicking aggressively on the hardwood floor. "This is ridiculous. You're being petty because we asked you to move out." "You didn't ask, Indy. You informed me I was being discarded." I kept my voice calm. "And you didn't just ask me to move out. You told me I wasn't family." "I never said, 'You're not family.' You just stayed because it was convenient." "Those were your exact words." Her mouth opened, then closed. For a brief moment, something like shame flickered across her face. "I was upset," she finally said. "But that doesn't change the fact that you deliberately deceived us about the Cape house." "No, I simply protected what was rightfully mine, just as your father intended." Lance leaned forward, adopting his negotiation posture. "Look, we can work something out. Sell the property and divide the proceeds. That would be fair." "Fair?" The word tasted bitter on my tongue. "Was it fair when I sold my condo to move in? With you? When I spent 5 years raising your son while you built your careers? When you introduced me as the help, rather than your mother?" Lance had the decency to look uncomfortable, but Indy's expression hardened. "Always the martyr," she snapped. "No one forced you to help with Mason." "No, they didn't. I helped because I love him, because that's what family does. And now you're punishing us by keeping the Cape house." I took a deep breath. "I'm not punishing anyone, Indy. I'm simply taking care of myself since you've made it clear you won't." A sudden noise from outside drew our attention. Through the window, I could see Mason riding his bike in Martin's driveway, with Martin pretending to chase after him. The boys' laughter floated through the open window. "Is that—" Indy stood abruptly. "You've been seeing Mason behind our backs?" "No. He's here with Martin. It's the first time I've seen him since I left." Indy moved to the window, watching her son play. For a moment, her expression softened. "He's been asking about you," she admitted reluctantly. "Wants to know when Grandma's coming home." The words pierced my heart. "What did you tell him?" "That you needed some time to yourself." She turned back to me. "What was I supposed to say? That we kicked you out?" "You could have told him the truth. That you decided I wasn't needed anymore." Lance stood, joining Indy at the window. "Look, this is getting us nowhere. The fact is, we need to resolve the property issue." I squared my shoulders. "There is nothing to resolve. The Cape house is mine. Your father ensured that." We could contest it, Indy threatened. Take it to court. You could try, I agreed. But Martin has all the documentation showing it was Harold's explicit wish. Plus, you signed the papers too, Indy. Her face flushed with anger. This isn't over. Actually, it is. I stood, signaling the end of our conversation. I've given you both 15 years of unwavering support. I've loved your son as my own. I never complained, never asked for recognition, and when you decided I was disposable, I left without a fight. I walked to the door and opened it. The Cape House is non-negotiable. It's my home now, my sanctuary, just as Harold intended. Indy stared at me, her expression a mixture of rage and something else, perhaps respect or simply surprise at my newfound backbone. Mason misses you, she said abruptly. He cries at night. The words were like a knife to my heart, but I refused to be manipulated. He's welcome to visit me. I'm still his grandmother, even if you've decided I'm not your mother. And where exactly? Will he visit you? Here? In this? Guest house? No, I said, my decision crystallizing in that moment. At the Cape House. I'm moving there next week. Indy's mouth fell open. You can't be serious. It's 3 hours away. I'm very serious. It's my home now. Lance placed a hand on Indy's arm, guiding her toward the door. We should go. As they stepped onto the porch, I called after them. Tell Mason I love him. That will never change, regardless of what's happened between us. Indy paused, not turning back. This isn't what Dad would have wanted. I smiled sadly, though she couldn't see it. Actually, Indy, it's exactly what he wanted. He knew me better than anyone, and he knew you too. They walked away without another word, straight-backed and rigid. Through the window, I watched as they approached Mason, who was still riding circles, around Martin. The boy spotted his parents and quickly abandoned his bike, running to them with open arms. But before he reached them, he turned and waved enthusiastically at me through the window. I waved back, tears stinging my eyes. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The Cape Cod house was exactly as I remembered, and entirely different at the same time. The weathered blue shutters, the creaking front porch, the way light danced across the hardwood floors in the afternoon. All this remained unchanged. But now, without Harold's booming laugh filling the rooms or his reading glasses perpetually misplaced on various surfaces, the house felt both hollow and full of possibilities. It had been 2 weeks since I'd moved in. 2 weeks of reacquainting myself with solitude, of learning to hear my own voice again without the constant background noise of other people's expectations. I was arranging wildflowers in Harold's favorite vase when the phone rang. Unknown number. I considered letting it go to voicemail, then changed my mind. Hello? Mrs. Keller? A man's voice, hesitant. It's Lance. My hand tightened around the receiver. Lance, this is unexpected. I know. He paused. I'm in town, near you, I mean, in Cape Cod. Why? I have a conference in Boston. I drove down to. I don't know why I'm here, honestly. He sounded different somehow, less confident, more human. Could we talk? In person? My first instinct was to refuse, to protect the sanctuary I'd created. But something in his voice gave me pause. There's a coffee shop called Seabreeze on Main Street. I can meet you there in 30 minutes. Thank you, he said, and I could have sworn he meant it. Seabreeze was quiet for a Saturday, just a few tourists lingering over late lunches. I spotted Lance immediately, sitting at a corner table, staring into a mug as if it contained answers to questions he hadn't yet asked. He stood when he saw me, awkwardly pulling out a chair. Thank you for coming. I sat, studying him. He looked tired, the polished corporate facade cracked enough to show the strained man beneath. Why are you here? Lance? He twisted his wedding ring, a nervous habit I'd noticed years ago. I've been doing a lot of thinking since we last spoke. About what you said. About how we treated you. I waited, unwilling to make this easier for him. Mason cries for you every night, he continued. He doesn't understand why you're gone. And what have you told him? Lance looked genuinely pained. Nothing that makes sense, not even to me anymore. He took a deep breath. The truth is, I'm here because I need to apologize. Of all the things I'd expected from this meeting, an apology wasn't one of them. Indy doesn't know I'm here, he added quickly. She'd be furious if she knew. Then why risk it? He looked out the window, toward the ocean barely visible in the distance. Because I can't sleep. Because every time I look at Mason, I see the hurt in his eyes. Because I stood by while Indy treated you like you were disposable, and I know it was wrong. I sipped my coffee, giving myself time to process his words. It wasn't just Indy, Lance. You were complicit. He nodded, accepting the accusation. I was. I let it happen because it was easier. Because confronting Indy is. He trailed off. Difficult. I finished for him. She's always been strong-willed. That's a charitable way of putting it. He gave a rueful smile. She's become. I don't know how to describe it. Cold. Calculating. Not just with you. With everyone. Including you? His silence was answer enough. Mason asked me yesterday if we could visit you, he said after a moment. I didn't know what to say. Indy has forbidden him from even mentioning your name. The pain of that revelation was physical, a knife twisting in my chest. He's 7 years old. He shouldn't be caught in the middle of this. I know. Lance met my eyes directly for the first time. That's partly why I'm here. Would you? Would you be open to seeing him? If I brought him without Indy knowing? The question hung between us, weighted with implications. I thought of Mason, his gap-toothed smile, the way he'd curl against me during thunderstorms, his endless questions about the world, my grandson, my heart. Yes, I said simply. I would like that very much. Relief washed over Lance's face. Thank you. He misses you terribly. I miss him too. Every day. We sat in silence for a moment, the cafe's ambient noise filling the space between us. There's something else, Lance said finally, his voice lower. Something you should know. What is it? He glanced around, as if worried about being overheard. Indy's been different since Harold died. Harder. More focused on appearances and status than anything else. I've noticed. No, it's worse than you know. He leaned forward. 2 months ago, I overheard her on the phone. She was talking to someone about accelerating the timeline now that you were out of the picture. Timeline for what? Selling your house. Your and Harold's house, I mean. The one you lived in for 30 years. I frowned. But that house isn't worth much. It's in an older neighborhood and it needs work. It's not about the house. It's about the land. Lance's expression was grim. Apparently there's been interest from developers. The entire block could be rezoned for commercial use. Indy's been in talks with them for over a year. The revelation struck me like a physical blow. A year? But I was still living there when Harold died. She was planning this while I was still in the house? Lance nodded, unable to meet my eyes. That's why she was so eager to get you into a retirement home. The developers want to break ground by next spring. I sat back, struggling to absorb this new betrayal. Not just discarded, but deliberately removed so Indy could profit from selling my home. The home where she'd grown up, where every doorframe was marked with her height through the years, where Harold and I had built our life together. I'm sorry, Lance said quietly. I should have told you sooner. I didn't know how. Why tell me now? He looked troubled. Because it's wrong. Because Mason found the photo albums you'd stored in the attic, the ones with all the family pictures in the trash last week. Indy had thrown them away. His voice broke slightly. He was crying, trying to pull them out, And she just told him they were garbage, that we needed to declutter before the move. I closed my eyes, imagining Mason's confusion and distress. When I opened them again, Lance was watching me with something like respect. "You're stronger than all of us, Rhonda. You always have been. I see that now." "Not stronger, just older. I've had more practice at survival." He smiled sadly. "Would next Saturday work? For bringing Mason?" I could tell Indy I'm taking him fishing. I nodded, surprising myself with the surge of joy that rose in my chest. Yes, Saturday would be perfect. As we parted outside the cafe, Lance hesitated, then said, "Harold would be proud of you, standing your ground, finding your voice." The unexpected kindness brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you for saying that." I watched him walk away. This man, I'd thought I knew. This person who was slowly revealing himself to be more complex than I'd realized. Not a hero, certainly not blameless, but perhaps not entirely a villain either. On the drive home, I found myself wondering about second chances. Not for Indy, some wounds cut too deep for easy healing, but for the fractured pieces of family that remained. For Mason. For myself. Perhaps even, in some limited way, for Lance. The horizon stretched before me, endless and blue, as I turned onto the coastal road that led to my house. My house, my life, my terms. For the first time in years, I felt the stirrings of genuine hope. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of September day that feels caught between seasons. Summer's warmth lingering in the air while autumn's crispness waits just around the corner. I'd been up since dawn, unable to contain my anticipation. Mason was coming today. I'd spent all week preparing, baking his favorite chocolate chip cookies, setting up the spare bedroom with colorful quilts, and a nightlight, just in case, and clearing a space on the beach for the kite I'd bought him. I wanted everything to be perfect, even though I knew what mattered most was simply being together again. At 10 o'clock sharp, a car pulled into the driveway. I watched from the window as Lance helped Mason out of his booster seat. The boy looked around curiously, taking in the weathered shingled house and the ocean just visible beyond the dunes. Then he saw me at the window. His face transformed, breaking into a smile so radiant it brought tears to my eyes. He broke free from Lance's hand and ran full tilt toward the porch, nearly stumbling in his haste. I threw open the door just as he reached the steps, and then he was in my arms, his small body crashing into mine with the force of a tiny hurricane. "Grandma! Grandma! You're here!" I held him tight, breathing in the familiar scent of his hair, still baby sweet at 7, mixed with the faint traces of the citrus shampoo he'd always insisted on. "I'm here, sweetheart. I've missed you so much." "I missed you too," Mom said. "You went away, but I knew you wouldn't leave without saying goodbye." My heart clenched at the innocent faith in his words. Over Mason's shoulder, I met Lance's eyes. He stood awkwardly by the car, hands in his pockets, worry etched across his face. I beckoned him closer. "Come in, both of you." The morning passed in a blur of joy. Mason explored every corner of the house, exclaiming over the shells I'd collected. The view from the upstairs window, the wooden sailboat Harold had carved years ago. He chattered endlessly, filling me in on everything I'd missed. His loose tooth, the science project he'd won an award for, the new friend at school who could do perfect cartwheels. Lance stayed mostly quiet, watching us with a complicated expression. When Mason ran outside to fly his new kite, Lance finally spoke. "I haven't seen him this happy in months." I nodded, watching through the window as Mason's kite caught the wind, soaring high above the dunes. Children are resilient, but they notice more than we give them credit for. "Indy's pushing for private school next year," Lance said suddenly. "In Connecticut, it would mean boarding during the week." Boarding? At 8 years old? I couldn't hide my shock. "That's awfully young." "I know. I've tried to talk her out of it, but she's convinced it's the best way to ensure his competitive edge. He made air quotes around the words, his distaste evident. We fell silent, both watching Mason as he ran along the beach, the kite dancing above him. "I've been thinking about what you said," Lance continued after a moment. "About how we treated you. About the kind of family we've become." He took a deep breath. "I'm not proud of the role I played." "Why did you let it happen?" I asked quietly. It was the question that had haunted me for years. He considered his answer carefully. "At first, it was easier to go along with Indy, to convince myself she knew best. Then it became habit, and after a while." He shook his head. "After a while, I think I was afraid of her." The admission hung in the air between us, raw and honest. "She's not the person I married," he added softly. "Or maybe she is, and I just didn't want to see it." Before I could respond, Mason burst through the door, cheeks flushed with excitement. "Grandma, the kite went so high. Did you see?" "I did." "Sweetheart, you're a natural kite flyer. Can we have cookies now? Dad said you made cookies." I laughed, grateful for the interruption. Some conversations weren't meant for young ears. "We certainly can. And afterward, how would you like to help me collect shells for that special jar I showed you?" Mason's enthusiastic yes seemed to lighten the atmosphere, pushing back the shadows of our previous conversation. The afternoon passed pleasantly. We walked the beach, collected perfect scallop shells, built a sandcastle complete with moat and drawbridge, and returned to the house sandy and content. After dinner, macaroni and cheese, Mason's favorite, Lance reluctantly looked at his watch. "We should head back soon. We told your mom we'd be home before dark." Mason's face fell. "Can't we stay longer? Please, Dad?" Lance and I exchanged glances over Mason's head. "Not today, buddy," Lance said gently. "But maybe we can come back soon. Promise?" Mason looked between us, his eyes big and hopeful. "I promise," Lance said firmly, surprising me with his conviction. As they prepared to leave, Mason hugged me tightly. "I don't want to go?" I knelt to his level, holding his small hands in mine. "I know, sweetheart, but you can call me any time, and I'll be right here, waiting to see you again." "Mom threw away our pictures," he said suddenly, his voice small. "The ones of you and Grandpa. I tried to save them, but she got mad." My heart broke for him, caught in the crossfire of adult conflicts he couldn't possibly understand. "I have plenty of pictures here," I assured him. "Next time you visit, we'll look at them together. And maybe we can make copies for you to keep." He nodded solemnly. "I'd like that." After one more fierce hug, he ran to the car, leaving Lance and me alone on the porch. "Thank you for today," I said. It meant the world to him. And to me. Lance nodded, his expression troubled. "Rhonda, there's something else you should know. I'm thinking about leaving Indy." The confession stunned me. "Because of how she treated me?" "That's part of it. But it's more than that. It's who she's become. The way she treats Mason when no one's watching. The constant pressure. The emotional manipulation." He ran a hand through his hair. "I've been consulting with a lawyer about custody arrangements." I took a moment to absorb this revelation. "And you're telling me this because I want Mason to have you in his life. Because when the time comes, I may need your testimony about what you've observed in our household." He looked away. "And because I thought you deserved to know." From the car, Mason waved frantically, calling for his father to hurry. Lance turned to go, then paused. "We never should have done what we did to you. I hope someday you can forgive me for my part in it." I watched them drive away, Mason's face pressed against the window, waving until they disappeared around the bend. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, reflecting off the calm surface of the ocean. I stood on the porch long after they'd gone, contemplating forgiveness, family, and the strange winding paths that life sometimes takes. 3 months later, on a crisp December morning, my doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Lance's car in the driveway, Mason bouncing excitedly beside it. My heart leaped at the sight of my grandson, this unexpected joy in my life. But there was something different this time. The car was packed full, suitcases, boxes, Mason's favorite stuffed dinosaur visible through the window. I opened the door. As they approached, questions in my eyes. "We left," Lance said simply. "For good this time." I looked from him to Mason, who was grinning widely despite the circumstances. "What happened?" "We can talk about it later," Lance said, glancing meaningfully at Mason. "Right now, we're looking for a place to stay while I sort things out. Maybe somewhere near here." Mason suggested we ask if you know of any nice neighborhoods. Understanding dawned. This wasn't just a visit. This was a new beginning. I looked at my grandson, at his hopeful face and trusting eyes. I thought of Harold, of his quiet wisdom and foresight. I thought of the journey that had brought me here, to this moment of choice. "I might know just the place," I said, opening the door wider to welcome them in. The house Harold had left me wasn't just my sanctuary anymore. It was becoming what it was always meant to be, a home filled with love, second chances, and the quiet, strength that comes from choosing kindness over bitterness, even when the path is difficult. As I helped Mason carry his backpack inside, I caught a glimpse of the ocean through the window, vast and changeable and beautiful, like life itself. Like the future stretching before us, unwritten and full of possibility. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.